experience in teaching English as a second language to students in Egypt and in Saudi Arabia. She holds a TEFL and a diploma in teacher training from the London Teacher Training College, a Pathways course from IH London, a CELTA equivalent, and a CET. She also has experience as a teacher trainer, of course, with us in the Cambridge PDQ program for the teaching with digital technologies. And as myself working with Ms. Issra'a for the past 3 years, mashallah, she is really an expert in using technology in education. So inshallah, she will be able to answer your questions today. She is currently teaching ESL at Princess Noura University in Riyadh, and this is where she's based. And she also helps or supports with the preparation classes for IELTS, GMAT, and GRE exams. I hope I didn't forget anything, Ms. Issra'a.
Thank you so much. No, yeah, all is there. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Khalas. Now I'll give you the mic. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so hello everyone. So today I'm glad that I'm with you, and I hope that our meeting today would actually add something to you, and hopefully it would help you develop your teaching through the pandemic that we have now. So today's topic is about virtual classroom management. And Ms. Basma has already introduced me. Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Ms. Basma. I'm teaching English as a second language at Princess Noura University. So let's start with the first poll that we have here. I want you to check this poll first. It's a wellness check. I just want to check on everyone today and see how you're doing. Okay, so according to how you're feeling today, please just check your answer. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm really glad that most of you are feeling great today, and I'm hoping that after our meeting, that the ones who are feeling not very well would feel much better, inshallah. Okay. Okay. So let's start now our presentation. So in order to have a successful virtual lesson, we need to have certain aspects in consideration. Now, the main 6 aspects that we are going to discuss today would be, first thing, of course, would be preparation and planning. Second thing would be active learning. Third would be effective instruction, communication, assessment and evaluation, and last but not least, parent engagement. So those are the main aspects that we are going to discuss today. So let's start by preparation and planning. So I'd like you first to take a look at those 2 pictures, and I'd like you to give me a quick answer on the chat pod. What are the differences between the 2 settings that you see in the photos? So let's see the chat. Okay, so I started to see some answers here. Okay, let's get back to, yep. Okay, so of course, yeah, like most of you have mentioned that on the left side, of course, it's an actual physical classroom, and on the right side, it's an online settings or an online learning settings, which could be like an online class or something. Okay, very good. So what are the main things that you can see that are a bit different? So now we know that this is a classroom, where people are physically together. Now, I want you to think from a teacher's perspective. Like, if you are the teacher who is standing in this classroom, and you are the teacher who is actually on the other side or on the laptop with the student on the photo on the right side. What do you think you would be missing if you are online with the student in the second picture? Okay. So the second child, Ms. Miriam said a very good point, that the second child or the second student on the right side who's learning online has no supervision. That's a very, very good point. Okay, Ms. Rasha said interaction. Yes. Okay, so that is a point that we're going to discuss now, Ms. Rasha, if you can find actually a sort of interaction with students online or not. Okay. Not being able to see exactly what the child is doing, okay, that's a good point. So you can, even if the camera is on, you might see the kid or the student maybe writing something, but not actually aware of what she or he is doing, okay. Body language, okay. Okay, now I can see that most of you has the answer of being interactive. Okay, so today we're gonna check together if we can enhance or fine-tune the interactivity, or how to be or how to have an interactive class with your students to actually communicate with them even if you're not in the same room. Okay, so Ms. Rasha had also another point, inability to follow up on silent students. Okay, that's a very good point. Okay, so Miss Nada said she might be just pretending, but she's not actually doing what the teacher is telling her to do. That's another good point. So all of these points, I want you to remember them, because while we are moving on through our presentation today, we are going to try to find a solution for each of these things that you have seen so far. But from your opinions so far, I can see that most of you prefer the physical classroom, the one on the left side, right? Am I right? Yes, yes. And I cannot blame you for that, because this is the thing that we are actually used to for years. Like how long have we been using the virtual teaching? How long have you been actually, versus how long have been actually using the physical teaching or being physically in class with students? So of course, like, you would feel more comfortable because this is your comfort zone. So now we are going out of our comfort zone. So we are going to try to have some resilience, try to adapt to the new situations, the new status that we have. And from this presentation, I hope that this would be much easier for you and you would change your mind. Okay, so starting with preparation and planning. This is the first thing that you actually do even when you are in a physical classroom or physically with your students, right? Like, you start by planning your lesson, preparing your material, whether it's going to be worksheets or activities or any kind of resources that you're going to use. So if we take a look at preparation and planning, now, the first thing we need to make sure that we are doing, I'm sure that most of you would be doing this by now, but it's very, very important to focus on it even more these days. And the most important thing is to have measurable objectives. When we have measurable objectives, it means that I can measure all of the objectives that I want to accomplish by the end of the lesson, to make sure that I can know or identify at the end of the lesson whether the students were able to meet those goals or objectives or not. So first thing, we need to make sure that we have measurable objectives. The second thing is we need to have those objectives as well to go side by side with the assessment. Okay, So let's take a look at measurable objectives. I have written something that might help you. I'm not sure if you are familiar with it or not. There's a technique called SMART. SMART technique is very, very useful to help you make measurable objectives or to check if you have measurable objectives or not. Is anybody here familiar with the SMART technique? Has anybody used it before? Do you know what SMART stands for? Okay. 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 So some of you said yes, some of you said no. So now I'm going to show you what SMART means. SMART here is actually an abbreviation for 5 important adjectives, okay, or 5 important points that you need to make sure that your objectives meet. First of all, it must be specific. So you have to be specific in your objectives. Like for example, if I want to say that, let's say I'm an English teacher, so I'm going to teach verb to be. So if I'm going to do my first objective, it cannot be, for example, to learn verb to be. When I put this objective to learn verb to be, how would you actually measure this objective? How would you actually know that the students have learned verb to be or not? So you have to make your objectives specific, okay? This is the first thing. Second thing is it has to be measurable. So you have to understand how to measure the information or the objective itself, whether it has been met or not. Third thing, it has to be achievable. So I cannot say, for example, that I'm gonna teach verb to be if the students don't know, for example, how to write yet. So it has to be an achievable goal. Fourth, it has to be realistic, which means that it has to be like doable with your students' level. You know your students and you know what they are capable of. So you have to be very careful when you write it that it should be realistic, okay? So you have to know their basic or their backgrounds, and according to that, you have to find out a way to put an objective that they can actually understand or that they can achieve by the end of the lesson. Last thing is timely. You have to put a certain time for each objective. So it has to be measurable also from the time perspective. So when I want to, for example, to teach them verb to be, I have to make sure that this should be achieved by, for example, in the first 20 or 30 minutes of this lesson. So I can move on to the next one. So you have to have time management to make sure that you can meet all of your goals by the end of the lesson. Okay, so this is what SMART means. Now, moving on to the next point. Now, as we said, implementing SMART or using the SMART technology, SMART technique, sorry, is used at any time, even in your physical classroom, when you are physically in a classroom. It doesn't have to be only in virtual classroom. But how can I apply the technology into my classroom while I'm planning? So if you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy has 6 levels. Who can remember the 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy? Can someone tell me? Okay. So let's start from the base of Bloom's taxonomy. Who can remember? Okay. Understanding, very good. Okay, so I can see that all of you or most of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. So if we take a look here, this is Bloom's taxonomy. If you look on the left side, we start from the first or the base of Bloom's taxonomy, which is remembering, then going up a little bit into understanding, then applying, analyze, evaluate, and then to create. So all of us as teachers, we try to implement Bloom's taxonomy as much as possible in our planning, right? But most of us would be in the lower order thinking part, which is remembering, understanding, and applying. But it would be great if you can take your students up to a higher level, which is analyzing and evaluating and creating. But how can we do this in a virtual classroom? How can we implement technology into Bloom's taxonomy? Like if I want some students to remember, like in a regular class, we usually let the students use a pen and a pencil and, for example, try to underline a definition in a book, or maybe highlight it, or maybe write it down. Okay, so you can actually use physical things like a pen and a pencil, and they can use it to find or remember the information. What is the alternative for that in a virtual classroom? So students can bookmark, they can highlight, they can copy and paste from certain resources, online resources that you would be giving them. So maybe you would give them an article and you would tell them, try to find the definition, for example, of a water cycle in this article. So they would highlight it, or maybe they copy and paste and they put it for you in the chatbot like we are doing now. So this is how we can implement technology into Bloom's taxonomy. If we go a little bit higher into the level of understanding, so we can actually ask them to tag, we can ask them to create a journal, okay, and we ask them to, let's say, for example, tell us that what are the main or the main steps or the main parts or of a water cycle. So what are the basic steps in a water cycle? So if they can write this down so they understand what a water cycle is and what is it formed of. Okay, if we want to move on to a higher level, so by applying, we can actually ask them to do certain things like doing charts on Excel sheets, or maybe upload certain work, maybe if they drew a water cycle, okay, and so on. As you can see, as we move on, each and every step or level of Bloom's taxonomy, there is different activities that you can use with digital tools to apply each level of Bloom's taxonomy. So for analyzing, we can use mind mapping. Okay, there are many websites that you can use for mind mapping, like MindMeister, for example. They can use surveying, like for using SurveyMonkey. And all of these websites, by the way, are free. Linking or validating, maybe going up a higher level, evaluating, okay, and this could be through testing, or maybe moderating. If you have, let's say, you can have a sort of debate between students. So if they can do that and they can evaluate the information in that debate. And you have the highest step, which is creating. Creating can be done in with different tools, by using podcasts, by making videos, by making cartoons, animations, blogging. All of these are digital tools that you can use for each and every level in Bloom's taxonomy. So you can still apply all of the levels of Bloom's taxonomy that you used to apply in a classroom, a regular classroom, also in a virtual classroom. Okay, so let's check if there are any questions so far. Okay, good. Okay, so what are the main points that I need to consider while planning? There are certain points that we need to consider while planning. Those 3 points or 3 main points are the actual learning environment. I have to think of the learning environment that each student has. And also I need to make sure that the activities and the media and the resources that I'm using and the content that I'm presenting is engaging to students, and what technology can offer in my plan for today's lesson. Okay, so if we take a look at actual learning environment, what are the things that we need to focus on? First of all, you have to think of the learning environment that it has 2 types. You have the synchronous learning environment, which means the live classes that you have with your students. So you are actually all together at the same time in the same place, like this Zoom meeting, for example. Or it's asynchronous. So you're going to give them certain activities or things to do or assignments to do after you finish your virtual class with them. So you have to think in this part of your lesson plan, where is it going to be? Is it going to be synchronous? You are going to be with them, so you can provide them with support instantly. Or it's going to be asynchronous, which means that you might give them support, but a little bit later, okay? Another thing is families' acceptance to the new virtual environment. Some families are not familiar with virtual classrooms. They are not familiar with the virtual settings. So it's very important to make sure that this point is put in consideration. If there is a certain family or some parents that are not aware of what you are asking their kids to do, you have to make sure that you have like a communication channel with the parents to make sure that they understand what you are asking from their kids to do. Okay, the age range, because there you have like elementary, you have K, pre-K, you have elementary, intermediate, high school. So each age range has the resources that are suitable for this age. So for example, if I'm going to ask a certain student to make a research which requires them to watch some videos on YouTube, so you have to be careful that they are not being subjected to certain media that is not suitable for their age. Okay, and of course, the basic knowledge of technology of the student himself is important. Does your student know? If you ask your student, for example, to create a portfolio or a journal, is the student himself aware of how to use technology? Does he or she understand how to navigate the internet, how to search for certain information safely? So all of these points, you have to consider them while you are planning your lesson. Now, when it comes to engaging students, now your content or the content that you are going to prepare has to be engaging, which means you cannot be the only source of information in the class, even if it's virtual. Can we do that? Yes, we can. How can we do that? With different techniques. You have to think of from a student-centered perspective. You have to have a student-centered class. And this can be done with different strategies that most of you actually are applying in your regular classes. And surprisingly, you will find out that you can actually also apply to your virtual classes. Okay? If you need the parents to be part of the lesson or a certain activity in the lesson, you also need to give them a hint or send them a message to let them know that your role is important in this part. Okay? Now, when it comes to technology, what can technology offer? Most of you think that virtual classrooms are not giving you all the resources that as a teacher to actually be creative with your students or to be interactive with your students. But believe me, you can. Technology can offer you variety. You have different millions and millions of resources for each and every subject out there, whether it's going to be for content, creating content, or even giving worksheets or assignments. It's giving you flexibility because now some lessons, maybe let's say that you ran out of time and there is a part that you need your students to know or to learn. Actually, they can do that if you give them the right resources online, and you can do it, for example, as a flipped classroom. So it can be a discussion that you start with the next class. Self-assessment. Some of these things you are not used to do in your regular classes, but technology can help you do that. Flipped classroom, as we said, and collaborative projects. Yes, you can. Even that, given that all your students now are separated, they are not together in one class, but they can still have online collaborative learning. Okay, how is that possible? Okay, let's see how is that possible. Okay, if we here at active learning. Okay, now active learning actually can be given in different ways. Now I want you to take a look at those examples and try to tell me what kind of learning is that, and if you have tried this before or not. Let's take a look at the first photo here on the left. What do you think this kind of learning is, or active learning is? Can you guess? Okay. Okay. Pair work. Okay. What do you think they're doing on the smart pad or the iPad that they are holding? Yeah, it's a kind of collaborative learning. Can you actually do this in a virtual classroom? Can this happen in a virtual classroom? Yes, they could be watching, they could be playing a game. Yes, exactly. Yes, Ms. Khairia, you are the closest. Yes, it's gamification. Okay. Well, actually, you can do that in a virtual classroom. Okay. And there are different websites and different LMS, learning management systems and platforms that provide that. And I'm going to show you some examples for them. Okay. What about the second picture? Here. What kind of learning is that? Group work? Okay. So as a group, what did they do? What are they showing? Project-based learning. Yes, very good, very good. Okay. What about this photo here? The third one down here. Yes, flipped classroom. Yes, all of these are types of active learning that you can actually use in your virtual classrooms. Even though the pictures here or the photos show that they are in real classrooms, but you can actually do that and give your students a chance to do it virtually. If you go to, for example, Edmodo, or if you're using Classera, I'm not sure which kind of LMS you're using with your students, but if you have a certain platform, a virtual platform like Edmodo, let's say, for example, Edmodo. Edmodo is free and for everyone. Like, for example, Classera and Moodle, they are a little bit, they have to be provided by the school itself, okay? But if your schools do not provide you with such platforms, you can simply use Edmodo as an example, okay? Now, Edmodo can actually give you a very good platform that you can use, Google Classrooms as well. In those websites, you can create virtual classes, and inside the virtual classrooms, you can create groups. You have the option of creating groups inside a certain class. So you can do the project-based learning. You can do any kind of online collaborative learning that you want by grouping your students inside the classroom. This can be done in Edmodo, and I think it's also available in Google Classrooms. Okay, you can also use the same things. This is of course asynchronous, which means if you want them to work in groups together after you finish your class with them. If you want to do the same thing when you are working with them at the same time, then, or the synchronous type of learning, then in this case, you have this option also available on Zoom and on Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, where you can have what we call breakout rooms. When you have a breakout room, it means like right now, I can divide you. Like let's say I have 75 guests right now. I can divide you into groups. Each group will be in a separate room, working together on a certain task, and I can actually work on each and every group separately. So this is a very, very nice advantage or option that you can use in your synchronous learning, where you can have breakout rooms. So during your live class, your students can be divided into groups as if they are in a real, physical, actual classroom, and you are managing those rooms separately, and you can see what they are doing and if they are doing their tasks properly or not. Okay. Yes, yes, we're gonna come to Padlet. We are going to take a look at Padlet also. Padlet is a very nice website that you can use in different stages of your lesson. But when it comes to grouping or doing online collaborative learning, those are the main websites, and they are free. And you can do the collaborative learning instantly, or you can do the groups and let them work on their own off class time. Okay. Now, content and media. As a teacher, as we said, your class should be engaging. So your students have to be always looking at what you are presenting and always paying attention. We don't want them to lose attention or to be thinking about something else or doing something else while you are teaching. So presenting your content has to be in an attractive way and in an engaging way. So we, like for example, now I'm using the PowerPoint. This is an example. And by the way, you can do a lot with the PowerPoint. It's not just simple slides. It has many options that you can use. And this is like the simplest way of presenting your content. If you want to go up a higher level, you can go to Powtoon. I'm not sure if you are aware with it or not. Powtoon is a very nice website where you can create cartoons or videos. So you can convert or change your PowerPoint into an animated video. So it's going to be more attractive to your students, and the animations would make them more engaged and interested in the content that you are showing or displaying. We also have emails. Emails also is an amazing website that you can use. Most of its features are free. You can also create wonderful presentations and you can make them interactive. We have also Prezi, one of the best virtual presentation maker websites there. We, when it comes to interaction with students, we also have Edpuzzle. I don't know if you heard about Edpuzzle before or not. Edpuzzle is a very interesting website. With Edpuzzle, you can have or change a boring YouTube video into a very interesting one. It allows you to have insert questions and pauses during the video to make sure that the students understand a certain point that you want them to get in this video. So let's say by the 3rd minute in the video, I want to make sure that they understood the difference between am and is. So by when I reach minute number 3, I can add a question there. So the video will pause and the students have to answer this question, and then they continue the video. So Edpuzzle is a very, very nice tool that you can use to make your class interactive. Okay, yes, I'm gonna type the names. You have Powtoon, and you have Prezi, okay, and you have Edpuzzle, Emaze, okay. So these are the websites that we have discussed so far. We also have another resources that I find very, very beneficial for you as teachers, because they provide you with resources, worksheets, ready-made videos that you can find per grade. Okay, like for example, Discovery Education, and also Freckle. Freckle is a new website, but it's very, very nice in differentiation. We all know that our students are not all the same level, and we need to make sure that our students meet the objectives that we want them to understand by the end of the lesson. So Freckle is a very nice website that allows your students to go at their own pace. Okay, so Freckle, for example, what happens in Freckle, you simply log in as a teacher, you add your students. Each student, let's say you are teaching math, so each student for grade 5, so each student will start by having a certain, like a small placement test for grade 5. From that test, the website will automatically know the level of the student, and from that level, it will start creating worksheets and activities that will help them to move up to a higher level. So Freckle is a very nice website. I recommend you to try it. It's mostly free. For teachers, it's free, but for institutions, I guess it has to be for certain fees. But it's very, very nice in creating worksheets and activities based on each student's level. Okay, so it helps you to apply differentiation in your classroom. Okay. Okay, the name is already there. You have Discovery Education and Freckle, but I'm gonna type it for you, no problem. So Discovery Education is mainly for science. Okay, so science teachers, I think you're gonna be happy with that. Freckle actually is for all subjects and for almost all grades from KG up to grade 12. Okay, so I think I've written all of the names of the applications here. Okay, okay. So all of these apps or websites you can create your content with, and you can make your classroom interactive. Your students will be a part, will be engaged. They are not going to be just receptors or receivers. They are going to be actually part of your lesson. So you are transforming your class into a student-centered class. Okay. Okay, good. Now, don't worry about the names of the apps. I've already typed them, but I'm going to type them again at the end of the presentation. Don't worry about that. Now it's time for the next poll, where I want you to tell me which of these advantages have you been able to experience in your virtual teaching so far? Okay. Have you tried gamification with your students in your virtual class? I'm not talking about the actual class, the virtual class or your virtual teaching. Which of these have you tried so far? If you haven't tried any of these and there are other types of active learning or other strategies that you have applied with your students, please feel free to choose other and type in the chat pod what other types of strategies or active learning that you've used with your students. Okay. Okay, so Miss Inji have used Quizzes and she has used Kahoot. Now, Kahoot is actually a very nice app to apply gamification. You can use it as in the gamification strategy. Yes, Quizzes also can be used, but this would be in the assessment. We are going to go to it later on. Kahoot also can be used for assessment, by the way. Okay. Live questions to answer in the chat room. Okay. Nearpod, very nice. Yes, Nearpod is a very nice website. You can also use for assessment. We have them all in the assessment section. Okay. The poll, yes, actually this the poll that I'm doing with you right now, you can use it actually as a kind of interacting with your students in class, in your virtual class. So if you just make a poll like this, okay, during class, okay, if you want to make sure that they understood a certain point before moving on to the next objective, for example, you can do it as a poll like this one here. Very nice. Okay. Good. Okay, Ms. Kutsia has used Quizlet. Ms. Cher has used Times Table Rockstar. Yes, Rockstar is a very nice website. Okay, very good, very good. Okay. Now, the good thing about this poll, actually, it has a very nice feature that you can see how many students have answered and how many students haven't. So for example, I can see here that 47% of you only voted. Only 33 teachers, I'm sorry, have voted in this poll. Okay, so this means that you have also another option that you can use while you are preparing your poll, is to show the names of who have voted and who has voted and who hasn't. Okay, so this also can be applied in this poll. Okay, and this can help you knowing the quiet teachers. Remember at the beginning, one of the lovely teachers here said that there are some quiet students that you don't know if they understand or not, or they do, or they're actually with you, or maybe they are doing something else. So this is a nice way to know. So you can call them by name. Okay, so for example, Noura, you haven't answered this poll. Why you haven't answered? So you can actually try to understand the reasons behind their maybe they didn't understand it properly. They are too shy to understand. And from here, you can actually start and try to find a solution for this issue. Okay. Okay. So I can actually share results as well. So you can now see the results. So you can share the results of your poll with your students. So they would know like how many answered or how many chose each choice. And then you can start a discussion about choices. Okay. Okay, so Ms. Rania also said a very nice idea using augmented reality. Yes, with HP Reveal. Yeah, that's a very nice option. Okay, so moving on to the next part where we are going to discuss effective instruction. Now, if you remember the first photos that we have displayed, the photo where this teacher is actually in class, when you are giving instructions to your students, which one do you think it's going to be easier for you to determine who understood your instructions and who hasn't? Which setting you think it's going to be easier for you to do that? The online or the physical classroom? Okay, so yeah, it's most of you said the physical classroom where you are physically in class with your students, because you can see their body language, you can see them through eye contact, you can see them, you can see through like just even when they are chatting with their friends, you can understand, you can feel, okay, the vibe in the classroom, where if the students understood what you actually asked them to do or not, okay? Yes, exactly, you can see. And this is not very easy when you have a virtual classroom. Even if all of your students having their cameras on in front of you, sometimes it's difficult to look at all of them at the same time and try to guess if each and every one of them understood or not. So in order to make sure that you are giving them effective instruction, okay, you have to think of the way that you are giving your instructions. So the instructions cannot be, for example, write this down. So it cannot be more than 3 steps at a time. You have to break down your instructions, and you have to make sure that each part is clear to them before you move on to the next part. So you try to break it down as much as possible. So now I'm going to give you some examples of giving instructions, and I want you to think of these way of giving instructions, or these instructions, and tell me what is the difference between them. So we have the first instruction here. Now we've discussed the idea of a daily schedule. So this is what the teacher says. What's your routine? So this is a certain type of instructions. We have another type of instructions here on the other side. Are you answering a question or asking a question? Are you working alone or in pairs or groups? So can you tell me what's the difference between those two types of instructions? So when I ask the student the question on the left here, what kind of instruction is that? What am I checking here? So now you have explained the idea of a daily schedule to your students, and you are asking them, what's your routine? So this kind of question here, what does it do? Why are you asking this question? Okay, so known knowledge. So you are checking the student's knowledge. Did the student understand the explanation of the lesson that you have already you have already done? I say now we've discussed the idea of a daily schedule. So now you have given them the concept. You have given them the concept. And you want to make sure, you want to check that they understand this concept. So this is why we call it a concept check question. A concept check question, or a CCQ. So CCQ, or concept check questions, are very important to use while you are explaining certain steps or certain section of your lesson. So once you have finished your explanation, before you move on to the next part, you need to check if they understood the first part or not. How do you do that? Simply by using the concept check questions. Okay. One of these questions can be simply, do you understand? Okay, but we will come to this question later. If we take a look at the right side of the questions, are you answering a question, or you are asking a question, or are you working alone or in pairs? What kind of questions is that? When you ask your students this question, why are you asking them these questions? You are checking what? What are you checking exactly here? If they understand the instructions that you have given them. So now I'd like you to be divided into 2 groups, and each group will create a question. So now I've given you instructions. I want to make sure that you understood these instructions. So that's why we call them instructions check questions, or ICQ. So it's very, very important, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure that your students understand each and every part of your lesson by using these check questions, okay? It depends on the part that you want to check. If you are checking a concept that you have just finished explaining, then you are using concept check questions. If you are checking whether they understood the instructions or not, then you are using the instruction check questions. The instruction check questions are mainly yes or no questions. So their answers should be quite simple. It's a simple yes or no, okay, to make sure that they understand. Or one word question. Are you answering a question or asking? So the answer would be one word, answering or asking. Are you working alone or in pairs? So it should be alone or pairs or groups. So your answer should be taken from the students in a very simple form. The simplest form would be in a one word or a yes or no answer. Okay, now let's take a look at the last question in the concept check questions and the last question in the instruction check questions. Do you understand? Now, how often do you ask this question in your classroom? When you say, do you understand? This is a concept check question, right? So I just explained to you, for example, how the water cycle is like, and I want to make sure that you understood it. So I would simply say, do you understand? Okay. So what would be the answer? Yeah, frequently, many times. Okay. And what's the answer that you have from your students? Yes or no? If you think of the yes versus no, what's the ratio? Yes, they would mostly say yes or no. Yeah, mostly they would say yes. For different reasons, for many reasons, whether they are actually think that they understand, or maybe because they don't, but they don't want to show their friends that they don't understand. Okay, so it's mostly a yes. That's why I wouldn't recommend using this type of questions, especially in your virtual class. Because in a virtual classroom, you cannot see them, okay? It's very difficult to follow up with each and every student. So such questions will not give you a measurable result. Remember when we talked about objectives at the end that they need to be measurable? So you have to make sure that the questions that you ask will actually show you that your students understand. So if we change the question, the do you understand question into, now we've discussed the idea of daily schedule, what's your routine? If you ask such a question, what do you think? Can you understand or can you find out from the answer of this question who got the concept and who hasn't? So when I ask, what's your daily routine? After explaining the daily schedule, you will have either students answering, giving you the right answer, so you know that those students got the concept, or the students who didn't answer it correctly, so they answered, but they didn't do it correctly, so you know that those students still need more work or they need more further explanation or further support in this point before you move on. Or students who would not answer. So you would know that this group of students are still not sure or too shy to share such answers. So now it's clearer to you. Now you have 3 groups, and now it's clear to you what you are going to do with each group. You know that the ones who already understood, that it's perfect, you can move on with them. The ones who are who answered but not perfectly well that they need further support, you can decide at this point whether to give them support right away or to give it to them later after class. Or the ones who are shy or not sure to answer, those are the ones that I think you most probably know by now, okay, whether they are too shy or maybe they need more support. And this is where the differentiation comes. You have to try to be prepared for those types of students by having extra resources for them. Okay, so this type of questions I personally do not recommend to use in class, especially virtual class. Do you understand? Or the one that says, do you know what you'll do? Because mostly you will get the answer, yes, even if they don't know what to do or they don't understand. So try to think of questions that are actually giving you answers that you can count on. Okay? Okay. Now, for clear instructions, you can also help your students through different tools that you can use. For example, you can use the chatbot as we are doing here right now. If there are some students who are a bit shy to answer, you can simply send them a private message trying to communicate with them one-on-one, okay, to make sure that they know they understood the concept or not. You can also use the voice with them if your students are like willing to explain. So you can do that using the mic, okay. You can also give them this option. This option is a very nice option in Zoom, where you can simply let them use the features that they have here, whether to use thumbs up or thumbs down, or maybe raise hand, or a simple yes or no if it's a yes or no question. All of these are tools that you can use with your students during class to make sure that they understand your instructions and communicate with students that are not sure if they understood the concept or not. Okay? Okay. Now, moving on to communication. Now, when it comes to communication, communicating with your students at these times is more important than ever. You have to create channels with your students where you can be connected with them, not only during class, but also after class. So it's very, very important to make them motivated most of the time. And you can do that by providing communication with them when they feel that you are sincere and you really want to help them. Students can feel that. So let's say, for example, you give them office hours. The office hours would be the hours where they can reach you after class. So after we finish our meeting, for example, today, I'll be available for you, let's say from 12 to 2. If you have any questions, you can ask me during that time and I'll be there to help you. So when you provide such hours for your students to communicate with them, it's very, very important. It gives them great motivation also. Okay, so how can you communicate with them off the live class? You have many ways, and you are the one who can decide which is best for you and your students. If you are using a certain platform, you can use this platform, like for example, Edmodo, you can use ClassDojo, you can use Classera, you can use Google Classrooms, you can even use, some teachers use Facebook and WhatsApp to communicate with their students. So if you feel that your students are responsible enough to communicate with them through these channels, why not? If you want to keep it formal and simple, so it should be through the formal channels that teachers usually use with their students. And this can be either through your LMS or through the platform that you usually use with your students. Okay, now this is a very important question, especially these times when we have students who already know that they are not getting like being assessed anymore. They have all passed, and they are all going to next academic year. So at this time, it's very, very important to keep your students motivated. Now, there are two types of motivation. You have extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation, which means that you are giving them rewards, and these things that you do to push your students to work. Okay, and these can be done through different applications, like using Kahoot, or using Class Dojo. Class Dojo gives stickers, Edmodo also gives stickers. Okay, but when it comes to intrinsic motivation, which is actually harder and at the same time more important, to make sure that your students want to learn, they want to come to your class, they are eager to come to your class, they are eager to learn, even if they are not getting a grade for that. Okay, so how can you trigger that in your students? Okay, now I'm going to give you some options, but I want you to think of more if you have. Okay, so you have the first option, which is promoting student-student interaction. So students interacting together. And this can be, as we said, through discussion rooms that you give them in Edmodo, maybe, or whatever the platform that you are using, grouping, or even during live class, where you can actually allow them to talk and discuss certain points live with you in class. Giving them more detailed feedback, like we usually give feedback to our students, but in a virtual class, I think you are going to need something more detailed, okay? Like something that is more personalized, or giving them time for reflection so that they can reflect upon themselves, they can see, they can decide for themselves what are their points of strength and what are the points that they need to work on, or all of the above. So what's your opinion? Okay, so Mrs. Min says it's D. Okay. B. Okay. C. Okay. No one chose A. Okay, so I can see that most of you have chosen D, which is all of the above. And from my opinion, yes, this is actually the points that you need to try to focus on each lesson that you have, and even after class, after you finish class. You have to promote students' interaction more than before, because when they are interacting with each other, even if it's in a non-academic environment or in a non-academic setting, like giving them discussion rooms or discussion boards where they can simply check on each other, see how they're doing, or simply ask each other, how are you feeling today? Like the one that we did at the beginning of our meeting. Such things actually helps students to feel and communicate with each other, and they start to make a kind of a relation with their peers. And this actually would help them to increase their motivation that we care, we are all here, and we are all in the same situation, and we are still willing to learn. So they can actually motivate each other. So use this as a tool where students can actually encourage each other, even by competing. Competing between students or competing students actually would promote their intrinsic motivation. Okay, when you give more detailed feedback, when you give them more detailed feedback, it would show them, this means more communication. It means you are going in depth with your students. So it shows them that you care, and this would actually make them automatically care back. Okay, so this is, yes, this is very, very important. Yes, yes, Ms. Qudsiya, I can see it has to be done gradually. You are absolutely right. And I'm sure that most of you actually have tried some of these so far, even before lockdown, before virtual classes. Those actually strategies you can use with your students in any settings, not only virtual, but those points are more important to focus on right now. Okay, giving them reflection. When the students when they feel that they are in control of their own learning process, it helps them to be more keen, and it helps them to be more motivated. So again, you are not the only source of information here. You have to give them confidence and to show them that you trust them to actually have reflection and to have a good judgment on themselves. Okay, and also it depends, of course, on their age range. You are the one who to decide, like which age range you should use certain techniques with them more profoundly than others. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about feedback and reflection. Like in your regular class before virtual learning, how did you usually give feedback to your students? What were the ways that you were using with them to give them feedback about their work? I want you to go back, okay, and think. What were the ways that you were giving feedback to your students? So Ms. Nada says mostly oral, okay. A quick recap, okay. Okay, written comments, praising awards, appreciation, oral, comments in the copybooks, okay. Okay, now you have been like teaching them virtually for quite some time now, right? Now, how has that changed? How do you give them feedback now? Through quiz marks, okay, on chat, okay, very good. Giving them badges, writing messages, very good, very nice. So you are actually, you are using most of the techniques that you were using in class, you are using now. So while you are with them in class, you are giving to them face-to-face or live, or after class or asynchronous settings, you are giving to them as messages or comments on their work. Okay, very good. Okay, have you ever given time for reflection in your class? So the students would like assess themselves, like today I learned to do this, or I'm not sure if I learned this part properly or not, or maybe I need to focus on this part more later on. So did you give time for reflection for your students to actually check their own understanding and reflect upon it? Okay, so some of you were using KWL, very nice. The KWL strategy, by the way, is know, want to learn, and something you learned before. So something you know from before, something you learned today, or something you want to know more about in the future. So that's a very nice strategy. Okay. Okay. Tell me one thing you've learned as an exit ticket. Excellent. Very nice. Very nice strategies. Regular self-assessment. Very nice. Okay. Journals. Wonderful. Okay. Do you think that these techniques can be used now in the virtual learning environment that we have? Yes. All of them can be used virtually. You can do e-journals, okay? You can have different websites like Padlet, for example. There is another one that is similar to Padlet, which is called Lino. Okay, I'm gonna type the names for you in case you haven't used them before, but I would highly recommend that you use them. Okay, Padlet and Lino are very, very nice apps, and they are actually found as apps and websites. So you can download them on your phone, and they can simply do the work, and you can check their work on their phone, on your phone, or through the website. So as you can see, a full project is done here on Lino. It's a simple dashboard that you have here, and all of your students, whoever has the link, can go to this board and write their answers. So you can use it to do the KWL charts, okay? You can use it to simply ask them a question, or what have you learned today? Or what do you wanna learn more about next time? Or what do you wanna start with in our next class, okay? So, yes, exactly, yes, Ms. Rasha. So for younger students, Ms. Rasha says that always think of reflection as homework and start wondering what to do or write or say. Yes, very good. That's why, Ms. Rasha, that's what I said at the beginning, age range is important. You have different websites, you have different resources, but you have to choose the one that is appropriate for the age range that you're teaching, okay? So you can simply use the poll for that. Okay, so these websites are very, very nice. You can also use for motivation. You can use a Class Dojo. If you haven't used it before, Class Dojo is a kind of motivational website where you can have your class there. You have a virtual class, and you can give stickers to your students based on the type of appraisal that you want to give them. Like they finished, they were like fast finishers maybe, or they were listening, for example, to you carefully throughout the whole class. They were quiet, they didn't cause any disturbance. And at the same time, you can use them to take away points. So it's a kind of applying the behaviorism theory, if you heard about it. Like you are rewarding, and at the same time, we're not going to say punishing, but you are taking away something from them as a kind of showing that this behavior is unacceptable in class, and yes, and you need to work on it, or maybe not to repeat it again in next classes. So you can give, and you can take away the stickers also, so they would know that this should not be done in class. So it's a very, very nice website. Okay, it also gives parents access. Yes, very good. Yes, thank you for letting me know, reminding me with that. You can actually have the parents checking their kids or their children's behavior all the time. So if there's something that they need to work on with their parents, they can discuss it with their parents too. Okay, we also have Kahoot. Kahoot is a very, very nice website. It's a kind of assessment. You can use it for assessment, and at the same time you can use it for motivation as well, because at the end there is a reward, a medal that is given for the first and the second and the third according to the highest points. So it's very, very nice to use Kahoot also as a kind of rewarding to your students, and at the same time for assessment. So as we said, Padlet and Lino can be used for both, for feedback and reflection. So you can give feedback on certain points that you ask them about, or you can ask them simply to, you can use it as a KWL chart, and each student would write something that they learned or want to learn more, or maybe already knew before the lesson starts. Okay, yes. Okay. Ms. Nada is asking, how does it spell? Can you write it? Which one? I've written Padlet. And I have also written Lino. I'm writing them again if you want to check one more time. Okay. Now, all of this, actually, when we are doing this, we are trying to communicate with our students academically. But it's very, very important as well to put in mind the social and the emotional aspects of your students. Now, sometimes your students, because of the circumstances and the pandemic that we are in right now, and some students maybe especially lower grades might feel a bit down, or they won't feel encouraged as before. So it's very important to keep in mind the social and emotional aspects. That's why I highly recommend, in order to avoid this situation that you see in this photo, try to have an open channel with your student. Try to check how do they feel most of the times. It shouldn't be only in an academic setting. Try to get a little bit more personal with them during these tough times. And one of the things, the simplest things that you can do is simply give them a face-to-face class. Showing your face to them, it means a lot. It would make a huge difference in how they feel and how and their discipline in class too. Because when they see you, most of the students would have the feeling that they are in an actual class. They are not just listening to a recording, okay? They can see their teacher and they can see that she cares in her facial expressions, in her eye contact, in your eye contact. So it's important to give them face-to-face meetings from time to time so that they can see you, and try to start your meeting with them with a wellness check. It doesn't matter how old they are. During these tough times, they need to feel that you care about them outside the academic settings. So a wellness check can be done in different ways. Can be done like the poll that I've just showed you. Okay, it can be done even through a Google Sheet or a Google slide. You can see the Google slide here. This is a sample of a Google slide I'm going to share with you by the end of this session. Okay, that you can share with your students, and they can simply check or choose the emoji that represents their feelings. Or if you are using Edmodo, there is a wellness check that is ready-made for you there. You can simply click on it and ask them daily, how do they feel? Okay. Now, when it comes to assessment and evaluation, now most of our students already know that they've passed, they succeeded, they don't need marks anymore. Okay, so it's still important to show some assessment and to evaluate whether they understood the lesson or not, even if it's not going to affect their final grade. Okay, now doing so would be much easier actually, okay, if you ask yourself these questions. Okay, you need to ask yourself these questions. Do your students know what they are assessed for? They have to know what they are assessed for before you do the assessment. Do you think assessment is harder during virtual learning? Should you be the only source of assessment? Do you ask yourself, was today's lesson productive? Because assessment and evaluation here is not only your evaluation to your students' level or understanding, it's also assessment and evaluation from the teacher's aspect. You have to evaluate yourself. You have to evaluate yourself as a teacher. Was your lesson today productive or not? I'm not going to say successful. I'm going to say productive, that your student actually learned something new. Okay, so put those questions in mind. We're going to answer each one of them properly later on. So it's very, very important to have your students. In order to let your students understand what they are assessed for, you have to create a rubric. This is a sample rubric for a math homework, for example. And this rubric should be accessible at all times for your students. So you can simply put it as a folder in the platform that you are using with them, that they can access, or maybe on your Google Drive, and you share the link with them so that they can check and know when you give them a 4 or when you give them a when you give in their homeworks, why did they do this? So this should be shared with them before assessment. You should also think of using different ways of assessment. You can use e-portfolios, you can use blogs. It doesn't have to be in the form of quizzes. You can do it in the form of online discussions. All of these are different ways of assessment that you can use, and it would make your classroom more interactive. Okay, we have different apps. We have Socrative, we have Quizlet, we have Quizzes, we have Google Docs, we have Google Forms. All of these are different apps that you can use for assessment. Okay, I'm gonna write them down for you now. Okay, so we have Socrative, and we have Quizlet, we have Quizzes, and we have Google Docs and Google Forms. Okay, these are only samples. Okay, you can use Kahoot. Yes, Quizzes is more like Kahoot. So if your students are bored of using Kahoot, you can switch to Quizzes. Okay, you can also put in consideration the peer assessment. Okay, where students can come together in the private groups that you do for them in classes, and you can create a group of 2 students only, where they can share their work together and they can assess their work to each other. Okay, and then you can discuss with them their peer assessment. So this is another technique that you can use with your students online. Okay, as a teacher, how can you make sure that your classroom is up to the standards? Now, there is a very interesting checklist. This checklist is called COIL, or Checklist for Online Interactive Learning, where you have 4 aspects or 4 points you need to check while you are doing your virtual class to make sure that your classroom was productive. So those 4 aspects are the learning environment, the faculty-student interaction. By faculty, I mean you as teachers, technology support, and the student behavior meet the criteria during your virtual classes. I'm going to share also this checklist. It's a full checklist, detailed checklist, and you can also use it as a tool to help you evaluate or reflect upon your lesson after you finish it. Okay. Okay. Now, for parent engagement, as we said last but not least, parent engagement is very important for all grades, especially the lower and intermediate levels of students, like elementary and intermediate levels. If you take a look at this photo represents almost only 40% of the parents globally. 40% of parents actually are that engaged in their kids' virtual learning. So how can we do that? So in order to encourage parents to be part of their kids' virtual learning, we have to think of those. What is the parent's role in their child's virtual education? And how can teacher help them to do these roles properly? Okay? So if we take a look here, this is a quick list that you can take a look. You can see the parents' role on the left side, where they need to check the requirements for the online classes. They need to make sure that they have a suitable environment for their kids, quiet internet connection, voice and video are on, set up a designated study space that is for their kids. They don't change it every single day. Help their kids build a schedule, familiarize themselves with the learning management system, the system that you're using or the platform that you're using, whether it's Edmodo, Classera, Moodle, whatever. Build a relationship with teachers. So as I said at the beginning, communication is a key. And of course, to encourage and motivate their kids to be part of the virtual learning system. The teacher's role here is try to set regular online meetings with the parents. Try to keep them aware of their kids' development. So if you have a virtual or online gradebook, try to give access to the parents to their kids' grades, to the feedback that you give to their kids, so that they can help you with that. They would know where their kids are actually and help you to develop certain points that you want to develop with your students more. And also to encourage and motivate parents actually. In this part, you need to encourage and motivate parents. If the parents are interactive, you have to encourage them to keep on doing that. Thank you for being interactive. Thank you for being supportive. I would like to get you more involved in your kids' learning environment or learning process. All of this can be done also through online discussion rooms. If you can provide them, Edmodo actually provides that, Classera provides that, where you can have a parent's account and you can communicate with the parent and give access to the parent to their kids' grades and development. I think we're done with all of the points that we needed to consider to have successful virtual classroom. I hope that the points that we have discussed today have helped you. They have added something to you. And now it's time for questions. Okay, so let's check the Q&A. Okay, I have a question here. Which virtual class is better? Live session or recorded lessons earlier for students, and then discuss about that later on. So, well, Zishan, this actually depends on how you want your classroom to be. Do you want it to be a virtual class? So, sorry, a flipped class. So you are using the flipped classroom technique. But in this case, you have to make sure that your students are able to access the information that you want them to know before you actually start the lesson. But again, this is not, you cannot replace that with live classes. As we said, it's very important to keep in touch with your students. It's very important that they see you, okay, as many times as possible, okay? So it depends on the strategies that you are using. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so as we said, this meeting is recorded and you are going to have a link to the recording, okay? And you can have it as soon as we upload it. Now I'd like to have your opinion about today's session. So if you could kindly scan this QR code. So this QR code will take you to Padlet, and you can simply express your opinion about today's session there. Your opinion really matters, and it's going to help me a lot to develop myself as a trainer and presenter, and to help you more in future meetings.
Thank you so much, Ms. Issra'a, for an informative session. Inshallah, everyone found it as beneficial as I did. I'd also like to thank all our attendees, and we will be sharing the content and the slides with you, as mentioned earlier by Ms. Issra'a and Ms. Basma. And we wish you all a great evening, and please take a screenshot of the QR code to evaluate the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, you can see also the link on YouTube for Anab's channel, where you will find the recording of this webinar. Okay, I have one more question here. It's a very interesting question. Before we end, I'd like to answer it from Ms. Yasmin. She says, how can you mark writing exercises? So if you are asking your students to write a certain assignment or a certain passage, how can you check that, or how can you give feedback to that? Now, writing now is not going to be only using pen and pencil. they can also use Word, or they can use Google Docs, where they can type their writing, and from that document you can simply insert comments on the parts that you want your students to check, or maybe change something in it. So this also can be a very good tool to use, Google Docs or even simple Microsoft Word, to check your students' writing and give them feedback instantly. Okay, I hope that this was beneficial to all of you, informative, and I wish you a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Issra'a. So we'll be closing the webinar now.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone.
and all of the resources, I'm going to share it with you on YouTube with the recording.
The
Thank
feedback from the
Yes.
QR code, please. Can you go back to the QR code?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and it will be in the slides when we send it and share it with you, inshallah. Thank you, Ms. Issra'a, and wish you all a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.